The day Elise Whitmore crossed the line, she didn't even realize she had done it. She stood in the polished marble lobby of Whitmore Enterprises, her heels clicking against the floor as she surveyed the morning rush of employees. Her eyes landed on Noah Carter, a software engineer from the third floor, walking through the entrance with his 7-year-old daughter's hand clasped in his. The little girl wore a backpack almost as big as her torso, her blonde pigtails bouncing with each step. Elise's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. "Some people just don't belong here." Noah stopped. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He simply squeezed Chloe's hand a little tighter and guided her toward the elevator. Chloe looked up at her father, her blue eyes wide with confusion. "Daddy," she whispered. "Did we do something wrong?" Before Noah could answer, Elise had already turned away. But one of the receptionists muttered under her breath to a colleague. "She always snaps at him, every single day." Elise heard it. Her expression flickered, something dark and unreadable passing through her eyes. Then, she straightened her shoulders and walked toward her private elevator, her heels echoing like a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. The mockery had become routine, as predictable as the sunrise over the Boston skyline. Every morning, Elise found a reason to criticize Noah. His reports were too detailed. His reports were not detailed enough. He spent too much time helping junior developers. He didn't delegate properly. The complaints shifted like sand, never consistent, never fair. But the one thing that seemed to irritate her most was Chloe. Noah's ex-wife had left 3 years ago, disappeared to California with a yoga instructor and a half-hearted promise to stay in touch. She hadn't. So Noah did what any devoted father would do. He rearranged his entire life around his daughter. He negotiated flexible hours. He found an after-school program that ended at 5:30, and on the days when that program was closed, he brought Chloe to the office, set her up in the break room with coloring books and homework, and prayed no one would complain. Elise complained constantly. "This is a Fortune 500 company, not a daycare," she said one afternoon, passing the break room where Chloe sat quietly drawing. "If you can't manage your personal life, perhaps you should reconsider your professional one." Noah stood in the doorway, his coffee growing cold in his hand. "She's not bothering anyone, Miss Whitmore. She's just doing her homework. She's a distraction. You're a distraction." Elise's eyes lingered on him for a moment, longer than necessary, before she turned and walked away. What she didn't see was Chloe carefully tearing a page from her sketchbook and folding it into quarters. The next morning, the little girl waited by the elevator on the executive floor, her father nervously hovering nearby. When Elise stepped out, Chloe approached her with the confidence only a 7-year-old could muster. "This is for you," she said, holding out the folded paper. Elise stared at the offering like it might bite her. "What is this?" "A thank you card for letting Daddy work here." Chloe smiled, gap-toothed and genuine. "I drew you with a crown because you're the boss." Something shifted in Elise's expression. It was subtle, barely perceptible. But Noah caught it. A softening around her eyes, a slight parting of her lips, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Then, the moment passed. She took the drawing without looking at it, muttered a curt, "Fine," and disappeared into her office. Later that day, Noah passed Elise's open door and saw something that made him pause. The drawing was unfolded on her desk, smoothed flat, and Elise was staring at it with an expression he couldn't name. She must have sensed his presence because she looked up sharply, and whatever vulnerability had been there vanished behind a wall of ice. "Don't you have work to do?" she snapped. He nodded and moved on. But he couldn't stop thinking about the way she had looked at that simple crayon drawing, like it had unlocked something painful inside her. A week later, Noah reached for his wallet during lunch, and it fell apart in his hands. The leather was cracked and peeling, held together by habit more than structural integrity. He had been meaning to replace it for months, but there was always something more important. Chloe needed new shoes. The car needed repairs. The wallet could wait. Elise happened to be walking past when it happened. She stopped, her gaze fixed on the worn leather, and her face went pale, actually pale, as if she had seen something that triggered a memory she had spent years trying to bury. "That's pathetic," she said, but her voice lacked its usual venom. It sounded almost hollow. Noah shrugged, gathering the loose bills and cards. "It still works." Elise opened her mouth as if to say something else, then closed it. She walked away quickly, her heels striking the floor with unusual force. He didn't know it yet, but that wallet had reminded her of someone she had tried very hard to forget. The cracks in Elise's armor began to show in ways she couldn't control. It started on a Thursday evening, when most of the office had already emptied out. Noah was still at his desk, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he raced to finish a critical system patch before 6 o'clock. The after-school program closed at 5:30, which meant he had exactly 45 minutes to complete an hour's worth of work, pick up Chloe, and somehow make it to her school's parent-teacher conference by 7. He didn't notice Elise watching him from across the floor. She had stayed late for a conference call with investors in Tokyo, but the call had ended early, and now she found herself lingering near the window, pretending to check her phone while observing Noah's frantic pace. His dedication was irritating. Everything about him was irritating. The way he never raised his voice when she criticized him. The way he always thanked the janitors by name. The way he looked at his daughter like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. At 5:15, Noah grabbed his jacket and sprinted for the elevator. Elise watched him go, something uncomfortable stirring in her chest. The next day, she overheard a conversation that changed something inside her. Two senior developers were standing by the coffee machine, laughing about something. As Elise approached, she caught the tail end of their joke. Poor single dads, right? Can't afford a nanny, can't keep a wife. What's next? Bringing the kid to board meetings? The other one snickered. Did you see his wallet yesterday? Thing looked like it survived a war. Maybe we should start a charity fund. Elise felt her blood turn to ice. She knew she should keep walking. This wasn't her battle. She had spent years cultivating a reputation for ruthless efficiency, and defending a subordinate she openly mocked would undermine everything she had built. But then she remembered the drawing. The crown. The gap-toothed smile. Enough. Both developers froze. They turned to find Elise standing behind them, her expression carved from granite. If I ever hear either of you discussing an employee's personal circumstances again, you'll be updating your resumes by end of day. Is that clear? They nodded rapidly, mumbled apologies, and scattered like startled pigeons. Elise stood alone by the coffee machine, her heart pounding. What had she just done? And why did it feel so terrifyingly right? Across the floor, Noah had witnessed the entire exchange. He stared at Elise with open confusion, trying to reconcile the woman who had just defended him with the one who seemed to take pleasure in making his life miserable. Elise met his gaze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she lifted her chin, turned on her heel, and walked back to her office without a word. But Noah noticed something she probably didn't intend to reveal. Her hands were trembling. That night, he stayed awake longer than he should have, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment while Chloe slept peacefully in the next room. He kept replaying the scene in his mind, the steel in Elise's voice, the barely contained fury, the way she had looked at him afterward, like she was daring him to acknowledge what had happened. He didn't understand her. He wasn't sure he wanted to. But for the first time since he started working at Whitmore Enterprises, he wondered if there was more to Elise Whitmore than cruelty and contempt. Maybe, buried beneath all that ice, there was something human trying to break free. The night everything shifted began with a server crash at 11:47 p.m. Noah was already in bed when his phone rang, the IT emergency line cutting through the darkness like a siren. Critical systems were down. The quarterly financial data was at risk. They needed him immediately. He called his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a retired school teacher who had become something of a surrogate grandmother to Chloe. She arrived in her bathrobe within minutes, settling onto the couch with a paperback, while Chloe remained blissfully asleep. By the time Noah reached the office, the building was nearly empty. Emergency lights cast long shadows across the lobby, and the security guard waved him through with a sympathetic grimace. He wasn't expecting to find Elise still there. She was in the server room when he arrived, standing amid the blinking equipment with her arms crossed and her silk blouse untucked. Her hair, usually immaculate, had begun to escape its careful arrangement. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "You're here," she said. It wasn't a question. "Server emergency. Same as you, I assume. I was finishing a presentation for tomorrow's board meeting." She paused. "It won't matter if the entire system is corrupted." Noah nodded and got to work. He moved through the diagnostic protocols with practiced efficiency, his fingers dancing across keyboards and command lines. Elise watched him, her expression unreadable. An hour passed. Then two. The silence between them was different from the tense standoffs in the office. It was almost comfortable. Two people focused on a shared problem rather than their personal friction. Around 2 in the morning, Noah's hands began to shake. He hadn't eaten since lunch, hadn't slept more than 4 hours in the past 2 days, and the coffee he kept drinking wasn't helping anymore. His vision blurred slightly as he leaned over a terminal. "When did you last eat?" He looked up, surprised by the question. Elise was studying him with something that might have been concern. "I don't remember." She disappeared without another word. 10 minutes later, she returned with a sandwich from the executive lounge and a bottle of water. She set them beside him without ceremony. "Eat. You're no use to anyone if you collapse." Noah stared at the food, then at her. "Thank you." Elise didn't respond. She turned back to her laptop, but he noticed she was breathing harder than normal. Her hands moved jerkily across the touchpad. When she reached for her coffee cup, she nearly knocked it over. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Fine." The word came out clipped, defensive. "You don't look fine." She spun around, ready to unleash one of her characteristic cutting remarks, but something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't judging. He wasn't mocking. He was genuinely asking. "I haven't slept in 3 days," she admitted. "The board has been questioning my leadership. There are rumors about a hostile takeover." "And I." She stopped, pressing a hand to her temple. "I'm fine." As if to contradict her, she swayed slightly on her feet. Noah moved without thinking, crossing the space between them just as her balance gave way. His hands caught her arms, steadying her against his chest. They both froze. She was close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle beneath the stale air of the server room. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Close enough that neither of them seemed to be breathing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay." They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, neither willing to break the contact. Then Elise pulled back, her cheeks flushed in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion. "I should go," she said. "The system's stable now. You should get some rest." She nodded, gathering her things with uncharacteristic clumsiness. At the door, she paused. "Noah." He looked up. "Thank you. For tonight." Then she was gone, her heels echoing down the empty corridor. Noah stood alone in the server room, his heart beating faster than it should have been, wondering what had just happened between them. The past that explained everything revealed itself on a gray afternoon in early October. Elise was in the middle of a shareholder presentation when Victor Hammond, the company's largest external investor, interrupted her mid-sentence. "Let's be honest here," he said, leaning back in his leather chair with the casual arrogance of a man who had never been told no. "The numbers are solid, but the leadership is questionable. Whitmore Enterprises needs stability. Not an emotionally unstable woman playing CEO." The room went silent. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. No one defended her. Elise felt her throat tighten. She had faced challenges before. Skepticism. Condescension. The quiet assumption that a woman in her position must have gotten there through luck or lineage rather than merit. But this was different. This was a direct attack on her competence, delivered in front of everyone who mattered. She opened her mouth to respond, but someone else spoke first. With respect, "Mr. Hammond, that's out of line." Everyone turned. Noah was standing near the back of the room, where IT staff sometimes lingered during presentations to handle technical issues. His face was calm, but his voice carried an edge that commanded attention. "Miss Whitmore has increased company revenue by 32% over the past 3 years," he continued. "She's navigated 2 market downturns and expanded into 3 new sectors. If that's emotional instability, I'd hate to see what you consider competent leadership." Victor's face reddened. "And who exactly are you?" "Someone who actually looks at the data instead of making assumptions." The tension in the room was electric. Elise stared at Noah, her expression frozen somewhere between shock and something else she couldn't identify. No one had ever defended her like that. Not colleagues, not friends, not even the family members who were supposed to have her back. The meeting ended shortly after, the board members filing out with murmured conversations and sidelong glances. Noah was already packing up his laptop when Elise approached him. "That was unnecessary," she said. He looked up. "Was it? I can fight my own battles. I know you can. But you shouldn't have to fight them alone." The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt something crack inside her chest. Some carefully constructed wall she had spent years building. "Walk with me," she said. They ended up in the small rooftop garden that Elise had commissioned 2 years ago but rarely visited. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dying leaves and distant rain. Boston spread out below them, a maze of buildings and traffic and anonymous lives. "I'm going to tell you something," Elise said, staring at the skyline rather than at him. "And I need you to not interrupt until I'm finished." Noah nodded. She took a breath. "When I was 24, I fell in love with a man named James. He was a carpenter, built furniture with his hands. Didn't have a college degree, didn't come from money. My father hated him. But I didn't care. I thought he was the most genuine person I had ever met." She paused, her jaw tightening. "We were together for 2 years. I thought he was going to propose. Instead, I found out he had been feeding information to my father's business rivals. Stock tips, strategic plans, anything he could get his hands on. My father paid him to do it, to test me, to see if I was weak. And James took the money, because that's what people do when you offer them enough." Noah said nothing. He waited. "My father told me it was a lesson, that love makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability makes you useless. He said I should be grateful he exposed James before I made the mistake of marrying him." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was supposed to inherit the company, so I learned the lesson. I stopped trusting people. I stopped letting anyone get close enough to hurt me." She finally turned to look at him. "So when I see you, with your worn-out wallet and your devotion to your daughter and your stupid, genuine kindness to everyone around you, I don't know what to do with that. It reminds me of everything I gave up, everything I thought I was too smart to believe in anymore." Noah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "So that's why you keep pushing people away." Elise didn't answer. She didn't need to. The tears gathering in her eyes said everything. She turned and walked back inside, leaving Noah alone on the rooftop with the weight of her confession settling around him like autumn fog. The day without mockery began awkwardly, like 2 people trying to dance to music neither of them could quite hear. Elise passed Noah in the hallway that morning and said nothing. No criticism, no cold remarks, no pointed glances. She simply nodded, a tiny acknowledgement that would have been unremarkable between any other 2 people, but felt monumental between them. Noah nodded back. The silence continued throughout the morning. When Elise attended the IT department's weekly briefing, she listened to Noah's update without interruption. When she needed a document printed, she asked politely rather than demanding. When she passed the break room where Chloe was doing homework, she paused at the doorway, watched for a moment, and moved on without comment. The staff noticed immediately. Whispered conversations rippled through the office like tremors before an earthquake. Something had changed between the Ice Queen and the single dad, and nobody knew what to make of it. Around 3 o'clock, Chloe asked her father a question that would later prove significant. "Daddy, does Miss Whitmore like sweet things?" Noah looked up from his monitor. "I don't think so, sweetheart." "Why?" Chloe shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Just wondering." The next day, she arrived at the office with a small paper bag clutched carefully in her hands. Inside was a single cupcake, chocolate with pink frosting, slightly lopsided from the bus ride. Noah watched nervously as his daughter marched toward Elise's office with the determination of a tiny general approaching enemy territory. He wanted to stop her, to explain that some boundaries shouldn't be crossed, but Chloe was already knocking on the glass door. Elise looked up from her computer. Her expression cycled through confusion, irritation, and something softer before settling on cautious neutrality. "Yes?" Chloe held out the bag. "I made this for you. Daddy says you don't like sweet things, but I think you do. I think you just pretend not to." The office went quiet. Through the glass walls, a dozen employees held their breath. Elise stared at the offering. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. She opened the bag, looked at the lopsided cupcake with its slightly smeared frosting, and did something no one in that building had ever witnessed. She laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a sardonic snort. It was a real laugh, warm and surprised and almost girlish. It transformed her face entirely, erasing years of carefully maintained severity. "Thank you, Chloe," she said. "It's perfect." Chloe beamed. "You should smile more. You look pretty when you smile." From across the floor, Noah watched the exchange with his heart doing something strange and uncomfortable in his chest. He had seen Elise cold. He had seen her angry. He had seen her vulnerable on that rooftop, her walls crumbling as she confessed her past. But he had never seen her like this. Open, genuine, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her expensive clothes or perfect posture. She caught him watching, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that things had shifted in ways they couldn't take back. Then Chloe tugged on Noah's sleeve, asking about dinner plans, and the spell broke. But the feeling lingered, settling into his chest like a warmth he hadn't felt in years. That night, lying in bed, he admitted something to himself that he had been denying for months. He was falling for Elise Whitmore, the cold, mocking, impossibly complicated woman who had made his work life miserable. And he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The kiss that no one expected happened on a Friday afternoon that had started like any other. Chloe had woken up with a fever, her small body burning against Noah's palm when he checked her forehead. He called the pediatrician immediately, secured an emergency appointment for 2 o'clock, and sent an email to his supervisor explaining the situation. He arrived at the office at noon, planning to handle a few critical tasks before leaving. But a network issue escalated, and by the time he looked at his watch, it was 1:45. He grabbed his jacket and ran for the elevator, his heart pounding with guilt and worry. Chloe was waiting at Mrs. Patterson's apartment, probably wondering why her father was late. The doctor's office was 15 minutes away. He might still make it if traffic cooperated. He didn't notice the group gathered near the elevator bank until he almost collided with them. 3 employees from the marketing department, laughing about something. One of them, a man named Derek who had always seemed to enjoy making others feel small, spotted Noah's rushed departure and smirked. "Late again, Carter?" "Let me guess. Daddy duty's calling?" Noah kept walking. He didn't have time for this. "Must be nice," Derek continued, his voice carrying across the floor. "Bringing your kid to work, leaving whenever you want. Some of us actually have to earn our paychecks." The others laughed. Noah's jaw tightened, but he reached for the elevator button without responding. He had dealt with worse. He could take it. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Derek stepped closer. What's the matter? Can't afford a babysitter on that single dad salary. Maybe if you spent less time playing house and more time actually working, that's enough. The voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Everyone turned to find Elise standing behind them, her expression thunderous. Miss Whitmore, I heard exactly what you were doing. She stepped forward, and Derek actually flinched. Noah Carter is leaving early because his daughter is sick and he needs to take her to the doctor, which is not only his right as a parent but also a perfectly reasonable use of the flexible scheduling policy that this company provides to all employees. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but Elise wasn't finished. Furthermore, Noah has logged more overtime hours this quarter than anyone else in his department. He has solved 3 critical system failures that saved this company millions of dollars, and he has done all of this while raising a child alone, without complaint, without asking for special treatment, and without making excuses. Her voice dropped to something dangerous. Can you say the same? Silence. Derek stared at his shoes. Get back to work, all of you. They scattered like leaves in a storm. Within seconds, Noah and Elise were alone in the corridor, the elevator humming softly behind them. You didn't have to do that, Noah said quietly. Yes, I did. Elise's voice was strange, thick with emotion she couldn't quite control. I'm tired, Noah. I'm so tired of pretending I don't care. He stared at her. Elise, every day I watch you with your daughter, and I see everything I told myself I couldn't have. Every day I tell myself that caring is weakness, that keeping you at distance is the only way to protect myself, and every day it gets harder to believe any of it. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be someone who feels things. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't. She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, in a movement that surprised them both, she grabbed the lapels of his jacket and pulled him toward her. The kiss was desperate and tender and inevitable, like a wave that had been building for months, finally crashing against the shore. Noah stood frozen for 1 heartbeat, then 2. Then his hands found her waist, and he kissed her back with all the confusion and longing he had been carrying since that night in the server room. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, neither knew what to say. Across the lobby, partially hidden behind a potted plant, Chloe stood with Mrs. Patterson, who had brought her to meet Noah for the doctor's appointment. The little girl watched the kiss with wide eyes. Then she smiled, gap-toothed and knowing, and whispered to Mrs. Patterson, I told you she liked sweet things. The fallout was immediate and unavoidable. By Monday morning, rumors had spread through Whitmore Enterprises like wildfire. The CEO and the single dad. The Ice Queen melted by a kiss. The gossip ranged from salacious speculation to genuine shock. And Elise could feel the whispers following her wherever she went. She did what she had always done when threatened. She retreated. For 3 days, she avoided Noah completely. She took different elevators, scheduled meetings during his lunch breaks, and buried herself in work that didn't require leaving her office. It was cowardly, and she knew it. But the alternative terrified her more. She had kissed him. In front of everyone. She had torn down walls she had spent a decade building, and now she was exposed, vulnerable. Exactly what her father had warned her never to become. On Thursday afternoon, Noah decided he had waited long enough. He found her in her office, staring at a quarterly report she hadn't actually read in 20 minutes. He knocked once and entered before she could tell him to go away. We need to talk. Elise kept her eyes on the report. I'm busy. You've been busy for 3 days. You've also been avoiding me, which is impressive given that we work in the same building. She finally looked up. What do you want me to say? I want you to be honest. He stepped closer, his expression serious but not unkind. If you kissed me because you felt guilty, or because you were overwhelmed, or because it was just a moment of weakness you regret, tell me now. I can handle it, but I need to know the truth. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. It wasn't guilt, Elise said finally. And it wasn't weakness. Then what was it? She stood, moving around her desk to face him directly. I kissed you because I finally stopped lying. To you. To myself. To everyone. She took a breath that shook slightly. I kissed you because somewhere along the way, you made me want to be someone better. Someone who isn't afraid to feel things. Noah's expression softened. Elise. A small knock interrupted them. They turned to find Chloe standing in the doorway, her backpack still on, her expression somewhere between curious and hopeful. She looked at Elise with the directness that only children possess. Are you gonna be nicer to Daddy now? The question was so simple, so perfectly innocent, that Elise felt her composure crack. A laugh escaped her, wet and unexpected, followed by tears she couldn't stop. Yes, she managed. I'm going to try. Chloe nodded, satisfied. Then she walked over and placed her small hand in Elise's. Good. Because he really likes you. He just doesn't know how to say it. Noah made a strangled sound that might have been embarrassment. Elise looked at him, tears still streaming down her face, and laughed again. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a guarantee that everything would work out. But it was a beginning, fragile and real and infinitely precious. The choice between him and the world came sooner than anyone expected. 2 weeks after the kiss, Elise received a formal request from the board. Victor Hammond had called an emergency meeting, and her presence was required. She knew what it was about before she walked into the conference room. The rumors about her relationship with Noah had reached the shareholders. Victor had found the weapon he needed. This behavior is unacceptable, Victor announced, his voice carrying across the mahogany table. A CEO involved with a subordinate. The optics alone are disastrous. The liability concerns are significant, and frankly, it confirms every suspicion I've had about your judgment. Elise sat at the head of the table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She had dressed carefully this morning, armor for the battle she knew was coming. What exactly are you proposing, Victor? End the relationship. Publicly. Transfer the employee to another division, or encourage his resignation. Show the market that Whitmore Enterprises is led by someone who puts the company first. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded in agreement. And if I refuse? Victor smiled, the expression predatory. Then we'll have to discuss whether your continued leadership serves the company's best interests. Silence filled the room. Everyone waited for Elise to capitulate, to choose power over feeling the way she always had before. Instead, she stood. Let me be clear about something, she said, her voice calm and steady. Noah Carter is one of the most dedicated employees this company has ever had. His performance reviews are exceptional, his contributions have saved us millions, and his character is beyond reproach. She paused, letting the words sink in. I am not going to punish him because small-minded people can't separate personal life from professional competence. I'm not going to transfer him or encourage him to leave. And I'm certainly not going to end a relationship because it makes certain shareholders uncomfortable. Victor's face reddened. Miss Whitmore, if kindness ruins my image, she continued, if caring about another human being makes me unfit to lead, then maybe this company needs a new CEO, not me. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, one by one, the other board members began to speak. Some defended Elise. Others questioned Victor's motivations. The emergency vote he had clearly hoped to force never materialized. Outside the conference room, Noah stood with Chloe, waiting. He had heard about the meeting from a sympathetic assistant and had come to the office despite Elise's insistence that she could handle it alone. When Elise emerged, her expression was unreadable. She walked toward them slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. What happened? Noah asked. She stopped in front of him. Then, to the surprise of everyone watching, she took his hand. I chose you, she said simply. I chose us. Chloe looked up at both of them, her small face splitting into a grin. Does this mean you're coming to dinner tonight? Elise laughed, the sound echoing through the lobby like music. Yes, sweetheart. I'm coming to dinner. Everything changed on a Sunday afternoon in late October. The park near Noah's apartment was quiet, the trees dressed in their finest autumn colors. Red and gold leaves drifted down like confetti, carpeting the paths where families walked and children played. Elise arrived first, which was unusual. She was carrying a small box wrapped in simple brown paper, and her expression held a nervousness that Noah had never seen before. He approached with Chloe, who broke free from his hand and ran toward Elise the moment she saw her. "You're here!" Chloe exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Elise's waist. "I'm here," Elise confirmed, hugging her back. She looked at Noah over Chloe's head. "I wanted to give you something." She held out the box. Noah took it, frowning slightly at the unexpected gesture. Inside was a wallet. Beautiful, handcrafted leather, clearly expensive but not ostentatious. And tucked inside the billfold was a folded piece of paper. He opened it to find a drawing. Chloe's style was unmistakable, but this wasn't the thank you card from months ago. This was new. 3 figures stood together, holding hands beneath a crayon sun. A tall man, a shorter woman, and a little girl with blonde pigtails. Underneath, in Chloe's careful printing, were the words, "My family." Noah's throat tightened. He looked at his daughter, who was grinning up at him with knowing eyes. "When did you make this?" "Last week." "Elise helped me." Chloe tugged on his sleeve. "She says she doesn't want to mock you anymore. She wants to be part of this." Noah turned to Elise. She was watching him with an expression that held hope and fear and something deeper. Something he recognized because he felt it too. "I don't know how to do this perfectly," she said softly. "I've spent so many years protecting myself that I've forgotten how to let anyone in, but I want to try. With you. With both of you." He reached for her hand. Her fingers intertwined with his, and she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. "I want that too," he said. Chloe positioned herself between them, grabbing both their hands. Finally, she declared with the satisfied authority of someone who had been waiting for the adults to catch up. They walked deeper into the park together. 3 people who had found each other through mockery and misunderstanding, and the slow, painful process of learning to trust again. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the path, and somewhere in the distance, children laughed and dogs barked and life went on in all its ordinary, extraordinary ways. Elise looked at Noah, then at Chloe, then at the world spreading out before them. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't afraid of what came next.